Okay, so this section is going to deal with basically all the mailering logic that we're going to be talking about. That's kind of the focal point of this tutorial series. So what I want to do first is generate our first attributes that we're going to end up toggling on the user model. So these things are going to actually exist in the profile of a given user that we'll hook into and basically allow us to toggle true or false if you should receive this type of notification in the future. And that's going to be something you can either enable or disable from the email itself or your account. So that's the whole goal. So first, let's generate the migration to add these fields. And I made them quite long, so I apologize if it's a pain to type and read, but explicit makes more sense when it comes to reading code later for me. So yeah, we'll call a migration add email notifications to users, and then each attribute is going to be start with like notify when and then continue on. So I'll type it out and then we'll verify that they're all typed correctly. Okay, so we have three here. One's going to be when a user is added to a project. I want you to know about it. You should get an email when you're added to a project. And when you're on that project, a new task is created by anyone on that project, you should get notified, assuming you're actually subscribed. And then notify when a task is actually complete. So that's another one. So I'm going to go ahead and run this. These are just Boolean properties we're adding to the user model. Now, if we want to see that in the migration, based on naming conventions, it's going to go ahead and name it using the users table. So we'll add it to the users table, these three things. Looks like I misspelled though. I'm going to go ahead and change that back to notify because I suck at typing. I'll save that down and then I'll just run Rails DB migrate. And actually, I messed up there. So I'm going to Rails DB rollback. It should roll back the latest migration. We need to set default values here. So for Booleans, they're just nil by default. For whatever reason, they should just be false in my opinion. But we'll say default true in this case. Because if you've just created your account and you're, adding stuff to projects, you should get notified. And then initially, if you don't want to hear from that stuff, you can toggle that to false. So now we'll run Rails DB migrate again. And there we go. Okay, so now we need to generate our mailers. So I'll say Rails generate mailer. I feel like this isn't big enough for you guys. Oops. Rails generate mailer. We'll call it project. And then you can add methods to it on the fly if you just type them out past the project here. So if you say user added to project, that'll create a whole mailer based on that. So you notice the views, it creates the project mailer, but also add the whole template for us and then some test previews. So it's kind of nice to have those already in mind so you can save yourself some time later. We'll do the same for tasks. Inside task, we're going to say task created and then task completed. Just like so. And that'll go ahead and do the same thing as we just did, just kind of duplicated it for each. Okay, so just diving in, the task created email, we want to fire off when an actual project is created and a user is part of the project. So on the creation, we have this bit here. After a project is saved, we probably want to do something at that point because we want to verify that the project actually did do the thing it did. So this is where it gets tricky, and you would think you could just define, okay, what user was it, and just send that one email and everything's fine. But what we're going to do is loop through all the project users and then send that email for each, assuming it's not the current user. Because if you're the one adding the people to the project, you probably don't need the email to tell you that you just did the same thing. So what we'll do is say project.users, and I'm going to call unique on it, so assuming the users won't be duplicated. Then we'll subtract the current user from that array of objects. Since the current user we don't want to get notified. Loop through each of those. I need to do here. And through that method, we'll eventually do, like, if they're subscribed, do the following. We'll get to that point. But right now, since we just added that mailer class, we're going to do project mailer with project. We'll pass in an instance of the project, instance of this given user, and then I'll also need access to the current user to kind of give them some feedback of who actually performed this task. And the concept of current user in a kind of background job like this, that will be a background job, is kind of hard to do in the essence of passing the instance of the current user through. You need to kind of account for it here instead of doing it in your model or your mailer explicitly. So a lot more to that subject, but I'll leave it out for now. Okay, so we're calling project mailer, and we're passing in these parameters, and you can pass in whatever you want here, which is cool. But at the end of the day, we're firing off this method in the project mailer class. So if you go into mailer, project mailer, we have this one here. Right now, it's got just some default stuff you don't need to really deal with. But we're going to call deliver later on it. And what this does is it kicks off active job, which is a background class thing that essentially tells what will be our queuing service, Sidekick, to throw this in the queue. And the idea here is if your app gets pretty big, you need to kind of be queuing stuff up. Otherwise, your servers are going to do all these things at once. If like thousands of users are creating objects or storing things or saving things on the fly, you need to kind of get things in a sense of, in a queuing fashion, so it's done one by one, so your servers aren't just basically melting behind the scenes. So that's kind of what's going on there. And deliver later essentially tells Sidekick to go do that. So hopefully that makes sense. We'll come back here to do some more logic around if this person subscribed to this mailer or not. But right now, this is what we need to get going. So I'll kind of continue on, just get the whole loop of the process here. So in the mailer itself, we need to kind of count for it. So here we'll actually remove this greeting bit, and I'll say user. Since we're passing through the user, we can get the parameter of user. And the same is true for project. And the same is true for author. So these three things, if you recall, are what we're passing through, and those names come from these fields. So from those, we can do a mail method call, and what I want to do is be kind of unique in how we do it. So the to is going to end up being user.email, since the user is the person that this is targeting. Subject will be a little more dynamic, just to give you some insight of what this email is about. So we'll say author.name, the person who did the thing, added you to the project title. So project. So that's kind of a nice to have there. Now what we can do to actually see this without kicking off several emails to test out, we can go and test mailers previews, project mailer preview, And in here, we basically just have some dummy methods that allow you to just preview this stuff locally. So we'll do the same kind of with call. You don't need to worry about like deliver later here. This is all just instances of this stuff. It's nothing that's going to be real world. So what we can do is pass in a project, much like we did. Here you just want to call just basic dummy data. You can create dummy data or just access stuff in your database directly. It's all whatever you want. So I'm going to just do user first and then author user.last. Since we have 2 users, this should be fine. And then notice the comment here. You can go to the localhost directly to this mailer preview and check it out. So I'll do that. So there's our template. Right now, nothing's in it, of course, because we didn't modify the view. So we need to go do that next. So go to project mailer, and I'll just worry about the HTML one. You can add the text only if you want. Up to you. I'll delete it for now. If you delete it, it won't render it. So I'll go to the view. We'll just say some generic stuff here with very little styling. So we'll just say hi. Author or user.name. Cannot type. And we'll say author. Now, assuming they have a name, if you want to check that they don't, you could do something like or author.username as a fallback. Added you to a new project called, we'll say link to. It'll be project title as the actual link title. And then what's important here is it's project URL and not project path. So URLs in emails are required. You can't use a path, otherwise you'll assume that person's in your app already, which doesn't make any sense. Okay, and then finally we'll say just like a generic call to action. Same thing. And that's just firing up a new window if you don't happen to be in that view. So we can just refresh. Now this actually hooks into that. We can go directly to the project. It won't open a new window here, but this one will. And there it is. So pretty cool. So that's working. Notice the subject's working. John Smith added you to this project as users, which is the actual project name, even though it doesn't make a ton of sense. So that's the actual project created email. One way we could test the real deliverability of an email is setting up that mail catcher app I showed you in the very beginning. I'll do that after I create all these methods for the tasks. So let's do that next. So in our tasks controller, I actually want to do this on a projects controller because we're creating tasks here. Or excuse me, on our task controller on the creation. So let's go back to task created, and here we'll add the same kind of call, but instead of project users, we'll call a task mailer instead of a project mailer. So the same stuff here. So project minus the current user, each do user now you probably want to do this after the task is actually saved just to make sure. So we'll do something like that. Now for each user, we'll render task mailer with kind of the same pattern here. So task, user, user, author, current user, and then we'll target task created, deliver later. Can't spell later. Okay. Again, we'll do some checking here in the future to make sure they want to be opted into this notification, but for now, we'll say yes, they do. So on the created logic, I just realized they called this task create, but it should be task created. So let's do that. And since I updated that method there, it looks like I probably need to do the same on these views. Sorry about that. Make sure they coincide. The same is true for the test. We have task mailer preview. This should be created. There we go. Okay, so here we'll do a very similar thing. And then we'll mail to user.email, subject, at task.project, title. Just throw the actual product there, and then we'll say a new task was created by author.name. Okay, and then in the view we can do that next. So task mailer, task created. I'll again delete the text based ones. Do that for the completed one too. And for created, very similar to a project. I'll just kind of copy this and update a few things. Let's see, added a new task for project, and we could just make some generic looking boundary for the task. Inline styles, because emails are atrocious to deal with. Background. Something simple. Then we could just render the task. Body. Okay. Now if we want to go preview this, again, we need to go back to that test folder, go to task mailer. We have task created, but we need to update the parameters to be something. So with task will be, we can just throw task.last, user.first, and then author, user.last. And then we could again preview this mailer. If you want to just see all your mailers, you can go to that. So we'll say create. That shouldn't be create. Why is it create? I think I need to reboot the app real quick so that accounts for it. Since I did a typo there, it's assuming it's still create, I think. Yeah, it's still not there, so there we go. Created now. And we have an issue, author project title. We don't have an instance of project there, so it should be actually task project. So task project title. And same for this. There we go. Cool. So now that's what that looks like. Ugly as hell, but works. Good deal. And notice project 2, a new task created by John Smith. Good deal. So we'll do the same. So essentially copy this over to completed. We'll just say completed. You can leave that. And then we'll go back to our mailer. And we'll actually go to the controller. So completed. If we go to our controller, we can deal with this in the parameter settings. So right now we have if task save, but on the update setting is where we're going to actually complete it, since we're firing that off with Ajax at this point. So in this parameter here, we can actually call that same kind of looping mechanism we've been doing for the project users. So project.users.unique minus current user again, each do user, and then we'll say task mailer with task is going to be task, and then user will be user, author will be current user, and then we'll say task completed, and then deliver later. So I don't know if I explained that user correlates to the user we're looping through here, but that's what's going on. And then current user is just, it's given. Okay, now on our mailer, we need to update that method. So task completed is here already for us. We just say mail to. We need to define basically these things again. And our email can be at user.email. Subject. At task.project.title. Same kind of thing as the project task created, I mean. And then we already updated the view. So that should be it for essentially the mailers. We need to make sure our preview is working just so we can verify it's legit. So if we go down to task mailer preview and update that accordingly, we can probably just do the same thing here. Instead of created though, we'll add completed. And we can go check that out. And I have a typo. There we go. Task was completed by John Smith. John Smith completed a new task for project 2. Here's the task, view the project 2. There it is. Even though it's not actually completed, it's more fictitious data at that point. Awesome. So our mailers we confirmed are working. We'll probably need to actually verify they'll send and work and everything next. Let's make sure we've got everything set up accordingly. One extra step I want to do though is add a link to our profile in our signed in session. So in our application layout, I'll just put a link to profile. I'll actually copy this. This will be edit user registration path. We don't need the method here. And see if that looks all right. If we go back to localhost, there it is. So if we go to profile, it's going to go to your default user. This is where I'm going to add the attributes that you can update your profile to accommodate for those Boolean properties we just added. So I'll actually come over to that view in devise, registrations, edit, and we can append those here. So I'll probably just put those right above the button. And I think I copied this stuff, put it here, and I said email subscriptions or email preferences. And for each field is just like a checkbox. So we could say f.checkbox. And I want to verify I'm typing these names right. So I'm going to go to my schema, copy these over just for reference, comment them out. Notify when added to project. And we need 2 more, so I'll do copy and paste. And I'll copy these, notify when task created. Notify when task completed. Okay, so these are going to be already set and checked since they're default to true. So already set, very cool. At this point, Devise doesn't know about these though, and since we're using Devise as our user, I guess, authentication thing behind the scenes, we need to account for it. So one final step I'll do before we go on to the unsubscribe setup for, automatically unsubscribing from these things in the emails, we'll need to configure these parameters to be, I guess you would say, whitelisted for the sake of saving to the database. So if a user set that, if you go to try to change that now and hit update, it's first not going to let you, but also just not even save that change. So this is all just state at this point. So what we want to do is to permit that in our application controller. My template goes ahead and installs this way. You might need to configure this different if you're using Devise in a different way in your app, if you're using Devise at all. So what I want to do is add those same fields here. I think I need to go, I'm going to go copy those again for reference because I can never remember. And we'll add those here on the account update array as extra keys. All 3 of those. Okay, so with that saved, everything should be cake at that point, so you can deal with saving those parameters when they're updated in your actual profile. So I'll stop here. The next step is to add the unsubscribe link to our emails and then figure out how we can generate a public URL to both be secure, but also unsubscribe that given user from that notification going forward. So we'll do that next. Hello Rails is my new course on Ruby on Rails. I'll teach you Ruby on Rails from the ground up. Visit hellorails.io for more information.